Welcome to the Tile Roofing Industry Alliance short course on Tile Roofing 101. For those of us that are experienced, we look at that picture and we see a medium profile eagle on the lower left. There's a Boro flat tile, concrete tile with no lugs. There's clay S tile, there's two-piece pan and cap, there's glazed tile, there's cherry coated tile. If we dump that on a person that's not familiar with our industry, somebody new that we'd like to have deliver some value up on the roof, or a homeowner or a contractor less familiar with it, we can overwhelm them very quickly. My name is John Jensen. I'm the National Training Manager for the Tile Roofing Industry Alliance. We ended part one with installation options and getting into battens and direct to the deck, so covering just clay and concrete, the profiles, the way it's colored, and the anchor lugs. Today, we're going to be looking at tile roofing installation options. That includes direct to the deck, meaning fastening the tile directly to the deck with no batten in between, battens, raised battens, and then layout techniques for proper row spacing. So first, with direct to the deck, look at this picture. It's a robust concrete S tile, and you would have no idea whether this is a minimum standard installation or a top of the line. We used every component, high quality underlayment. There's no way to tell from this point here. And we're looking at a direct to the deck application. That means there aren't any battens. There's no raised battens. We're going right to the underlayment. And so the line for that first row is where we're going to put the top of the tile. So if you look at that anatomy of the first row, we're going to be chalking our first line, and the top of that tile is going to rest on that line. What are the benefits of going direct to the deck? This represents what is a fairly common installation in Southern California. There's some more upgrades being seen, but I've always kind of referred to it as the land of the minimum standard, because the benefits to going direct to the deck are an advantage in some ways. There's no horizontal dams, meaning a batten blocking water flow. So moisture and condensation can move unimpeded down to the eave. The drawbacks, if they're mechanically fastened, there's going to be more penetrations. If there's no battens, there's no advantage in the fastening component of having a lug tile. So you're going to have to fasten that with a mechanical fastener of some sort, and you're going to be penetrating the underlayment at least once for every single tile. That also means repair and replacement is going to be more challenging because that fastener is underneath the succeeding row. We're trying to help minimize that challenge, and we're going to be doing some shorts on using clips so that when you remove a tile. But that's one of the challenges with a direct to the deck application. When you remove that tile, you've got to remove the fastener, and there's no batten just to hook the new tile on. We're going to have to secure that tile one way or another. Another drawback for the roofer when it comes to a direct to the deck application is that the tile are resting right down at deck level. And we have our flashings, our sidewall flashings, our valley flashings, they're on top of that deck also. And that means when our tile, especially a low profile tile, comes in contact with that sidewall or that valley, we've got to remove some material from that piece, or we've somehow got to elevate it up out of the water flow, or it would just lay there and literally block the water flow in that channel. So you can see that this tile has had a hammer taken to it and removed some of the lug, the continuous lug across the top. Here's another example where I took my saw and just made multiple cuts and made an easier chunk out of that tile. But that's one of the challenges with direct to the deck applications. Another place where direct to the deck is very common is in Florida, especially Florida south of Orlando, where foam adhesive fastening is very common. Part of that is that they build a very substantial roof underneath the tile. So, we think of the underlayment as a backup system in the bulk of the country. In Florida, they look at the underlayment differently in different systems. So sometimes they see the underlayment as a backup like we do in the rest of the country. And other times they see their underlayment as part of the primary roof system. This is an older picture showing the foaming tile direct to the deck on what was a built-up roof. Today, we see a shift over to self-adhered membranes, direct to the deck application, virtually no penetrations. They'll still have some at the eave, but virtually no penetrations through a pretty significant roof under the tile. Clay tile have more products that have no lugs. You can see the upper right corner there. You can see the big S tile. This is an MCA clay tile on Herman Memorial in Houston, Texas. The guys are actually installing the tile direct to the deck. Other ways we can avoid battens, there's a strap tie system. These straps reduce the number of penetrations, also avoid the horizontal damming of having battens. And the straps are affixed to the deck, minimizing the penetrations because they'll only have an anchor fastener in the strap about every 4 feet. When they start installing the tile, they actually can wire tie the tile to the little perforations in those straps. This is in snow country, so you can see the snow retention. And in addition, there is a nose clip on every tile that goes through the fastener hole, comes out, and then nose clips around the tile below it. But again, a direct to the deck application, no horizontal battens. Okay, let's take a look at battens. Battens typically are nominal 1x2 wood battens. The battens I'm showing you there are cedar. If you are in a cold and humid climate zone, you're going to be required to have some sort of a moisture resistant batten. But if you're in a warm and dry zone, you are not required to have a treated or a cedar batten. Once those battens are installed up on the roof, you'll see something like this. Notice that the battens installed direct to the deck cannot be longer than 4 feet. We've got to have a break, a gap in them every 4 feet. They do not have to be lined up the way they are in this picture. He started at a gable, so they happen to be lined up, but that's not something you're required to do, but we've got to have that minimum half-inch gap every 4 feet so that moisture and condensation, maybe a leak from a broken tile that hasn't been fixed yet from storm damage, if that water gets underneath the tile, we want it to be able to exit the roof and flow down slope. So that's why that's required there. Talking about water flowing down, you'll also notice that at the valley, just like at the sidewall, the battens have to stop. We can't run those battens out into the valley flashing, and we can't run them out into the sidewall. So you would think that it's the same problem we're going to have that I pointed out with a direct to the deck application. But there are components that we can use there. One is called a batten extender, and they're plastic. They make them in 2 sizes. One is 10-inch, one is 18. You can see the 3 fastener holes in the one on the top, it's laying flat. And then you can see where it's boxed in red, that end part kind of makes a U shape, and you just fit that over the batten and put a couple of fasteners in it, and it extends out into the flashing zone, and the little feet keep it up out of the water flow. Most importantly for us roofers, that means we don't have to spend time cutting or chunking out the tile. We don't have to worry about the water being blocked in that sidewall flashing. Also, these half tile above a sidewall flashing, we can't put a fastener through the pre-punched holes, because if we do, we're going to go right through our flashing. Those need to be adhered, sometimes wire tied. One way or another, that half tile needs to be secured. We're able to utilize the same value that we got from the batten out in the field. Let's take a look at the features on the tile. I mentioned the holes in the tile. In concrete tile, the holes are not punched all the way through initially, and that's because there's 3 holes in that tile. We are not going to use all 3 holes to put a fastener in there. They're strategically located so that if we cut that tile in half, we still have a hole in each piece. But we can easily punch a copper nail through those holes. And then the reason the holes aren't punched all the way through, if we're not going to utilize the hole, we don't want that vulnerability there. And if we do need it, we can just pop a nail through. So that's what I did here. You can see the small blowout on the back, which is totally normal. And I did that so you could see where the batten actually lays and where that fastener will come through the batten, right dead center of it. That's by design, obviously. So if we take that same tile and we put it on the roof, you see how the lug actually engages with the batten, so it can't slide down slope. And if we put a fastener through there, that fastener goes through the pre-punched hole and right into the batten. We look at the bottom end of that, the butt edge of that tile, you'll see the EAVE riser metal coming up. So although this is a medium profile Malibu, you see where the black line is, that's where the EAVE riser metal will fit in that metal. And almost every concrete tile that I know has some sort of detail on the back. There are weather checks down toward the butt edge where you'll have a larger weather check like you see there on this medium profile, and some other rib or reinforcing part of the tile there, and the EAVE riser metal will fit into that slot in between the two. On a low profile tile, it really is a slot that runs all the way across. On these medium and high profile, there'll be some features on the back of the tile. In the red circle, if we go straight up from that point where that EAVE riser metal makes contact with the tile, if we look at that distance in between that point and where the downslope side of the lug is, that distance determines where we chalk our first line when we're on a batten job. Every tile is different where that slot is, and the roofer and the tile get to determine those locations. That said, it's important to remember that first line that you chalk for a batten installation the tile is going to sit a ½ inch or an inch up slope, depending upon the thickness of the batten. If we look at what a direct to the deck tile looks like compared to the one on the batten, you'll notice other than being slightly elevated, because we want that batten to be thick enough to engage the tile so that the tile doesn't rest on the deck. But it's in the tile itself is in the same place. But the location where we snap that first line for a batten installation is where the batten goes. If we're doing a direct to the deck, that location is where the top of the tile is going to go. Small detail, but it matters up on the roof. Otherwise, you may have too much or too little overhang if you're used to doing one thing and switch. Again, that varies for every tile. We always want to measure the back of the tile first thing when we get started to determine those numbers. Okay, raised battens. We do have a short course on tile roof components, and it includes some of the pictures you're going to see here. But first, let's talk about a raised batten. The basis for a raised batten is a counter batten system. And you see that we've got vertical battens and horizontal battens, and that's giving us that benefit of keeping the batten off of the roof deck. It's not creating a dam as water might try to migrate down. The water that's under the roof isn't just from leaking, it also can be condensation from moisture-laden air that migrates under the tile during the day. Take a cool, humid climate like the Pacific Northwest. During the day, it might be 55 degrees and the humidity level is high, and then at night it cools down to 30. That moisture that was able to be carried by the air during the day condenses overnight. It can be substantial, and so we want that water to be able to escape off the surface of the roof. That's why we're required in the Pacific Northwest to have a raised batten system. The other thing you'll notice there is that it's the screen down at the eave. That's because we're allowing air to come in, and somewhere up at the peak that we can't see in this drawing, there's going to be a place for that air to escape. And that provides us something in addition to moisture escaping or water escaping. It provides us convection, air movement, and above sheathing ventilation. So that allows air to come in at the bottom and escape at the top. There's all kinds of benefits to the roof, to the homeowner, to the longevity of the roof. But I sell components to homeowners for the value that it provides them, but I buy components for the value that it provides me as an installer. So as an installer, all of those benefits, energy conservation, longevity of the roof, those are great, but I also buy them for some of the things I'm going to show you right now. Here is one of the raised batten systems. This is the elevated batten system by Westlake, and you can see that the battens themselves are raised up off of the deck by little pucks. Air and moisture can move underneath. If you look down at the eave, it's blurry, but you can see the eave riser metal. You can see a long oval, kind of a racetrack cutout there. And then you see in the middle, almost dead center, you see a small hole. That's a weep hole. But the two long ovals that you see, those are intakes. That's where the air is going to come in underneath that tile. Even a flat tile, we're going to have air movement underneath it. Same with the Eagle system. This is the Eagle arched batten. So you've got this arched batten that allows moisture and air, moisture to run down, air to travel up. Same thing, look down at the eave riser metal. You can see the slits in there. Those are actually louvers. If you can see the other side, they look like a louvered vent. And again, that's going to allow air to come in, migrate up slope, and exit. I know we've got some people in Texas and in Arizona on here today. So just imagine, one of your 118-degree days in Phoenix. The tile are hot, the battens are hot, the underlayment's hot, and I don't care how much ventilation you have, the attic space is going to be hot, and the deck's going to be hot. It's not going to be as hot because there's the ability for air to move. But then move into 10 o'clock at night, and the sun goes down, and instead of 118, now it's just 98. That air is going to want to escape. It has the ability to migrate up, and it's going to be replaced by that cooler outside air at the time. That means by the next morning, all of those components, everything above the deck is going to cool down to the ambient outside air temperature. So there really is an advantage from an energy conservation point. But again, that's for the homeowner. That's what we sell. That's what we sell to them. But for me, it's this message right here. I always install battens anyway. Installing a raised batten is no more difficult for me. In addition, it's easier for me. When I put a raised batten into a valley or into a sidewall, I don't have to worry about getting a batten extender. I don't have to worry about propping the tile. I don't have to worry about chunking out or cutting the tile to allow water and moisture to move underneath. I don't have to worry about going back 4 years from now after the roofer that I had then is no longer with me and dealing with a leak because the roofer didn't do any one of those things. By utilizing these components, I avoid all of those things. And quite frankly, it allows for lesser experienced people to be up on the roof by utilizing the components. That's my opinion. I'm not saying we can go to having, people that don't know what they're doing up on the roof, but I will say that using components does reduce the amount of skill and time and energy, even for an experienced person, necessary up on the roof. So take a look at this clay tile on the left. You see the fastener hole is actually punched all the way through. Clay tile they will be, and the same with the Westlake product on the right. It's the only non-lug concrete tile that I'm aware of. Cedarlight and Madeira are the names for their regular and lightweight product. The fastener holes are punched all the way through, but another aspect of where they're punched, because they are non-lug tile, is important. If you look, that's an eagle low profile on the left, and one of the clay tile you were just looking at, you see the fastener hole in that clay tile is almost 2 inches down from the top. Remember when we said we're going to chalk a line, and that line for a non-lug tile or a tile direct to the deck, that's where the top of the tile is going to go. That's where the top of that tile is going to go for that clay tile. On the concrete tile on the left, the eagle tile, there is about a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch lug, continuous lug on there. So the tile is actually going to be sitting a 1/2 inch upslope of where we chalk that line, and that puts that fastener hole dead center in our batten, in our 1x2 batten. In a non-lug tile, the fasteners are typically about 2 inches down, and that means if we put a regular batten on that tile or on that roof and try to fasten through it, we're going to miss the batten, or we're going to chip off the bottom part of it. So if you're going to utilize a batten, which there are some advantages to, we already know of, if you're going to utilize a batten with a non-lug tile to get the tile up out of the water flow and up off the deck, you've got to use a 1x3, a larger sized batten, and those were made and available for you. Okay, lastly, we're going to get into layout and techniques for proper row spacing. Why is it so important? The primary reason, and it is very clear, minimum 3 inches, 15 inches for an 18-inch length, minimum 3-inch overlap, 3-inch overlap. It's throughout the manual. Our manufacturers have tested their products with a minimum 3-inch headlap. So even they aren't able to tell you, well, you're at 2 3/4, you're at 2 1/2, it'll probably work, because they haven't tested that. They've tested it at 3 inches. It's a critical component of doing layout. We want to get it there. So from that side of it, from the meeting code, meeting the prescriptive requirements, you've got to have that 3-inch headlap. When you lay out a roof in a consistent fashion, it also looks cool and it makes it easier. So it has both an aesthetic and a functional component. These two slopes were able to come together, so the valleys are lined up. It looks neat. Also, if you have irregular layouts, it also is very easy for your eye to pick up. At least for me, I see this right here. That second row from the ridge jumps out at me like a sore thumb. I bet it does to most of you. If that doesn't, this one might better. One thing you can say about this roofer is if you look at that slope there on the right, he was consistent, because look at the one on the backside. He did the exact same thing. Oh, the point with this one is it looks terrible from the ground. For a roofer up on the roof, you go, gosh, what was he thinking? But the other point is it has very little to do with function when you lap a tile more than necessary. This roof is an old slurry coat, probably put on in the mid-'80s, and it's still up there functioning today. But that's not what we want to do up on the roof. Doing layout is important, both for aesthetics and function. Even vertical, we won't go into vertical alignment today, but you look at the vertical alignment on the far left there. Yeah, it looks like heck, but it's also functional. Look at where the water is going to go in the pan as the pan disappears and then pours itself down into the mortar at the gable. The Tile Roofing Industry Alliance, we are fundamentally a manufacturers association. Our association is driven by our manufacturing producers. If you want to take a stronger look at our industry, talk to your local sales rep, and they will be able to share more about it.